Hello and welcome back to another episode for Project Seed Money. My name is Sharissa Bradley and I am so excited that you are here. Today I am joined by guest Jaimee Mayne, who is an author from Australia, and I am so excited to interview her today. Please help me welcome Jaimee.
Welcome, Jaimee. Thank you so much for being here. We are so excited to be interviewing you today, and I am really glad that you're spending some time with us. We are really trying to focus on getting women past the part of this story is in my brain and I need to get it onto paper. And there does seem to be this sort of like disconnect in that jump that happens between like, we know that there's a story to tell and we want to, but there is sort of a block or something holding us back. And there are many, many people who have made that jump successfully, yourself included. And that's really what our interview is based on today is how can we encourage and support and pour into these women who are ready to share their stories, but they're just maybe there's something stopping them. Maybe there's like a little block. And let's talk about your writing process and your book. And maybe that will give encouragement and support to the women who are in those shoes as well.
Thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to be here and, have the opportunity to share my journey and my story. Of course, every time we write a book, it's like deeply personal. It's something from our heart that we have to share with the world. And, that can be intimidating, but it's also such a beautiful process to go through and to, have a physical product at the end of the day to say, this is kind of like a timestamp or a milestone in your life. It's like, I did this, I experienced this, these challenging things happened, and I made a commitment to myself and I honored that. And it's a gift to yourself to be able to create that time and that space to birth this project. And it is like a process of birthing. Like, you've got to think about it beforehand and you've got to plan it and then you've got to do it. And then you've got to decide how to publish it and, what the title is. And there's all these beautiful steps that go on it. And I think sometimes it can create a really lovely community around you as people bring in these ideas and help you to, create this beautiful product that's something that's going to be with you forever and is really a legacy to your story.
Oh, I love that so much. And it makes me think like the book is like this trophy almost. Like the way you were saying, like you birth the process of the book and then you get to hold it and it is yours. And it's not just that you did the book, but that you made the commitment to yourself and you followed through. And that discipline, that takes courage, that takes bravery, it takes so much stamina and energy. And that's such a beautiful thing. And the way you explained it, the book, I was thinking to myself, like, it's almost like you're holding the trophy. Like, look what I did for me and also for other people too, because they're reading and learning from their stories. Do you want to share a little bit about what got you started writing in the first place? Have you always been a writer? Did it start later?
So I guess like in terms of my writing career, where did it start? I potentially get really emotional when I talk about it because I was that kid that would write little stories at home. And, I was born in 1991. When I was 5 or 6, we'd had the Microsoft 95, literally the first, Microsoft computer with Word, and you'd sit there and type it out. And it's really lovely to think about because they were both really aspirational. I was really into sport. And so it was a lot about like going to the Olympics and like, achieving these beautiful, wonderful things, like lots of aspiration. But there was actually a really deep difficulty or something to overcome. And just like really quickly, I remember this story I wrote. My brother was playing in the football grand final, and I was going to the Olympics, and we thought it was going to be on the same day. And so this issue in our family was how are we going to go and support our two kids that are like playing elite sport? And then the end of the story was like, oh no, it's a week apart. Like it's all fine. Like it's all okay. It was just a miscommunication. And I remember when I was a child and I realized like that the Olympic Games is like never going to be on the same weekend as the football grand final. And like there's people called planning and scheduling, and like these world events don't happen on the same day was like this massive relief to me. But then fortunately, unfortunately, I went through this real wave of like self-criticism, not being a good speller, people unintentionally reading my journals, and I went through a really, really dark period with my writing and my self-expression. And, probably for like 10, 15 years, I'm gonna say nearly 20 years, my writing was basically suppressed. And this was a huge part of my healing journey to heal that inner child and reconnect with that freedom and that expression and that love. And part of it was like, who was I writing for? Who was reading it? Who was editing it? What was I trying to achieve, from a child and like through, I guess you'd call it middle grade. Yeah, so I think that's like, can be a really important thing to talk about. Like, are there some core wounds or some aspects that make it really difficult for you? And I guess, we talked about, the book being a trophy at the end. This was like a huge, huge fucking healing process for me to start to sit down and my self-worth and my self-expression, like it was massive and it was significant. And that's just like on the writing side. And, the content had its own healing journey as well.
So incredible. And then you did end up self-publishing. So on top of all of the healing that had to take place, there was probably, I'm guessing, because for myself, there was a learning curve when it came to the actual publication process and like what that takes. Because you think, like, as a creative, for myself, I thought like, oh, I'm going to write and then it's going to be like done and then just like perfectly well received and just like easy peasy because the writing was such a challenge because it is a challenge to be disciplined to write a whole book. But then when it comes to the actual publishing process, it kind of brings its own journey.
Yeah. And so I think there was lots of things that happened in parallel. So just, really quickly, I guess I had a bit of a spiritual awakening and I, spent some time away from my career and I created a lot of space in my life for this healing process because that's what it required. And I had lots of intuitive hits and like, I guess, psychic readings or astrology readings that, writing was important to my story and my life. And so this was kind of happening in parallel, this permission to write and people kind of encouraging me. And then that's when I went and started this learning process and I did a course and started to learn what's involved on a like technical level or a deeper level in terms of the self-publishing process and what needs to happen. And I guess through this period of time, I was doing heaps of journaling, heaps of note taking. And I think that's really important that when we're talking to people that are thinking about writing a book or like talking about sharing their story, it's just start that writing process with freedom and self expression and not say, I have to sit down and write a book or I have to sit down and write a situation. It's just getting the pen and paper and starting to build that habit and that discipline. And then for me, so this was probably like a 2-year process, I'm going to say, about learning about the publishing process, starting to write freely and, putting thoughts onto paper. And then something I wanted that was really important for me was I was working a part-time job in retail and I actually took 10 days off and I went to my mum's Airbnb, her little cottage in the country, and I just spent 10 days writing. And now that content didn't end up in this first book, but like we were saying about giving yourself permission, talking to people, be like, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm committing to. I think having those 10 days away was a really important starting point to that commitment process of saying, I'm going to write something and I'm going to publish something. And then I came back to the city and that's when I could see the complexity in writing a longer book and I decided to publish this shorter book. So this is actually quite a short booklet that I ended up publishing. But once I decided to do that, it just flowed. Like I reckon the whole thing was like a week. It was like bang, 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 bang. And so the format of this book that I ended up writing is a quote and then a paragraph about how that quote related to my life. And so it goes from, high school and personal development through this spiritual awakening, meditation, mindfulness, I then did my Reiki training, and so energy healing in the middle of this, and then kind of ended up in quantum physics and like my engineering brain. So like really kind of deep dive cosmic universe crazy shit. And so the actual process of producing this book was like really, really short, but it had been like a 2-year lead up to that process.
I think that's pretty typical. And I think even just in anything that we do, we see this like iceberg model of like what you don't see and what you do see. And what people on the outside typically see is that last week, like, oh, I did this, I got it out, and now it's this product. But that under the sea part, that what we don't see, that was that buildup, the education, the 2 years. And sometimes even if you can't write a whole book, or even if you know I am going to write a book someday, even just watching a 20-minute YouTube video here or there to kind of start gathering that knowledge, gathering that education, just recognizing there is a technical aspect to writing a book. Even if you go with a traditional publishing route with an agent and a traditional publisher, there's still an education that has to happen. So for myself, like whenever I would get stuck, I would just do some learning. Like, let me just learn a little,
Exactly.
jump on
Mhm.
and like get a little bit of information, read about Amazon and how their publishing company works, like get a little education because it often does work that way where we build up, build up, build up, build up, and then there's a product. And that's really all that we see as consumers is that end result. So I think it's important to know that if someone is starting their journey right now, it might be a little while, kind of like a real slow engine moving. But then when it flows, like when you allowed yourself to let it flow, maybe in that 10 days, some of these energetic blocks were removed, right? Like the inner child healing. Because if there's a writing block that's coming from past shame and past like traumas, that's not going to be solved just by being disciplined.
100%. And that was a huge thing for me is like, even when I would sit down to the desk and, these feelings and sensations were coming through, and it's kind of like that aspect of nervousness and excitement being the same feeling with a different mindset. And just what does that feel like? And how do you process that? And how do you allow that? And, maybe it is literally using the writing to clear that information or those blocks, and understanding when are you writing just to write, just to like clear energy basically, and when are you writing with more clarity and thought and not technical elements, but like that there's going to be a specific reader at the end of the day. And I think, in all honesty, if I could say one thing to the audience that's thinking about writing, is start the process of writing for yourself and start the process of writing to heal before yourself, and then allow that to move into more of a publishing piece. And I think if we can't write for ourselves and enjoy the fun of writing and start to learn to love the process, that's really a fundamental part of writing a book and writing for other people, is my opinion.
I couldn't agree more because when I sit to write thinking that someone is going to read, the mental chatter, the monkey mind that comes in is things like who's going to want to read this? Why would you even bother? You're wasting your time. Like I get this like negative kind of self-talk when it's for other people. Whereas when I sit down with pen and paper and I'm journaling to express myself, I do often pull out like, oh, that's perfect for my next book. That's an awesome like paragraph or sentence or chapter title. But I definitely wouldn't want someone reading what I've been writing, and for us over here, we call it our shitty first draft. So like everyone is entitled to write their shitty first draft. Like get down, get to the nitty gritty, scratch it out, cross it off, make a mess. That's just for you. And then when it comes to editing, pay someone to make it pretty for you. There's full jobs of people who do that.
100%. I agree so much. Like when we give ourselves that freedom and that opportunity, that's where the magic comes. So there was two things that came to mind. One was when I learned that a piece of art or a piece of writing or a piece of work doesn't have to be done in 1 hour or one sit. So I very much had this thing from school, like we're going to art class and we're going to do a painting, or you've got 2 hours to write a poem, like go and write a poem. And it freaking blew my mind when someone told me you can come back to a painting and you can paint over it 2 or 3 times, or you can make it darker, or you can add an object over the sky once it's dried. It was like completely revolutionary to me because in the schooling system, I felt like it was you've got 2 hours to write a poem or you've got a week to write this essay. And I had a lot of anxiety over the editing process and like how long it actually takes to write this. And like, as I mentioned, I was very sporty. So, like, my schedule at school was full. And I didn't have 10 hours to write on an essay and like perfect it and change it. And so it was always so freaking stressful because I just expected it to take 2 hours. And if it took 8 hours and I wanted to make it right and I wanted to, flesh out my ideas, I felt so restricted in that schooling system to express myself through writing. And there was very much a specific, we want this regurgitated without actually, what do you actually think about this, Jaimee? Like, do you actually have an opinion? So that was a really interesting process that you can come back to it. You can write something and let it sit there for 6 months and then come and like find the nuggets of gold in 20 pieces of writing. And that was really interesting when I was going to work with a coach and it was something like 50,000 words I'd written in 50 articles or 50 documents. And I said to her, I was like, I don't know what to do with this. She's like, there's 10 books in here, Jaimee. I was like, yeah. So that's what I would say to someone, write 50,000 words of shit and then decide what to do with it afterwards. Like, I don't know, if you don't know where to start, just write some words and then think about it later.
Get a journal. That's always the best thing to do is just sit with a journal. Just tell yourself stories about anything, literally anything. Like writing creatively gets our creative juices flowing and will show us where our blocks are, where the things that are stuck are stuck. And I think sometimes
Mhm,
we can get so caught up in the idea like I'm writing a book that we're not working on the writing,
mhm,
not coming in that
mhm,
flow state because we're so stressed about this has to be a book. When I wrote my own book, I thought like an idea of what it was going to be. And then by the end, it was not anything like what it was. But the ideas in the beginning stopped me for a really long time and kind of put that block. So it's like you have to find what is it that's stopping you?
mhm, mhm. And I think that's it. Like, if you've got something deeply personal to say and to share, like, there's a process of being comfortable with that story within yourself, and it might be telling your friends or telling your family. And I think there needs to be a really deep honoring of that, that you're sharing a piece of your story and a piece of your soul with the wider audience, and to not think that you should just be able to do that in 5 seconds or make a decision and that you're going to be okay with that in a week's time. Allow that to simmer in, have some conversations with people. I think there's nothing better than meeting friends and telling them, I've got this pet project and this is my story and this is where it's going. I think that can be really free and liberating to start to share that vulnerability, I guess, like in a safe environment, because people have bought my book and I have no idea, like one person in Canada. It's really cool, but for some people that could be like quite daunting as well, and just allowing that and accepting those feelings as they arise.
Absolutely. And if someone that is a stranger to you does pick up your book and reads that book, you may get or hear a line from your book back to you. Like, oh, you wrote this in your book and I want to share it with you. That could be triggering. That could be extremely triggering if your story is so tight close to you that you're feeling like, oh, if I share this and they judge me, having someone tell you back your own story, your own words can be so vulnerable and triggering. So being comfortable with yourself, being comfortable to share and talk to people. I mean, when you write a book, it goes to sell to strangers. So it is going
Mhm.
to come back in that way from somebody who isn't familiar to you. So I definitely think it should be like we should talk about it a little bit.
Yeah. We never know who needs to hear our story and how our story can help someone else. And I think having that at the forefront, like when I say it, it kind of sounds obvious, and people in that writing story art space might talk about this frequently. But if you're new to this writing space, there is someone that is going to benefit from you sharing your story. There's always going to be people going through something similar or that they can learn, even if it's a completely different situation. And I freaking love reading biographies. That's like my favorite thing. And I learn one thing from each person. And the flip side of that is we have no idea how our words are going to resonate with someone and the impact that that's going to click into something in their life. With my book, I had a friend read it and she literally read a page a day because she had to integrate it and see how it applied to her and what did it make her think about her life and her experience. And I never really expected that to be such a freaking healing experience for them as the reader, to have these little light bulb moments or these little light ignitions that would send them on their journey or their path. And even this idea, I think she was doing some group coaching work and she introduced other people the idea of, well, what's 10 quotes that inspired you, or who are people that you looked up to? And so this ripple effect that you have no idea about what's going to happen. What's someone going to tell someone else, like, oh, I read this story and it really inspired me and now I want to go do XYZ. Like, you have no idea. And it's not yours to own as well. It's like, what, that's the freedom of once it's out in the world. It's like, hey, bye, like, here you go. Have a nice time. And that detachment from it. So I wrote this book 5 years ago, which is crazy. And it's just kind of like sitting there chilling. And now I guess I'm in this process of like revisiting it and rereading it to myself. Just really quickly, this is something I never expected. My draft for my second book was so deeply healing for myself. There was a quote that I wrote and I would read it back to myself and it would like help put me back into alignment and back on track. And I just thought that was so special when we can use our own writing as a really healing modality to help us in the struggles of life.
So beautiful and totally full circle, because it brings us back to where we started at the beginning about writing to heal. And then we're back to using our own words that were written to encourage us. And we're really writing for ourselves. Yes, of course, it is going to make an impact. Of course, it goes out into the world and we don't know how that will change other people. But really, an ultimate goal should be that self healing, that self love, that work for ourselves. And then even that trophy, like I was saying in the beginning, like holding that, showing like, not only did I live through this and exist through this, I came out victorious. And how
Mhm.
encouraging. How encouraging.
Yeah. And I think so. And like, it's always nice to sit down and be like, what's the purpose of this book or what's the purpose of this writing? And is it purely a healing journey for the self, or do you intend to have other people read it, or is it part of a bigger business plan? And, do you want to, as part of coaching or talking or workshops, or, and just understanding what the purpose of it is and just being okay with that.
It might evolve over time too, right? Because when you first wrote the book, did you imagine that you would be teaching kind of like group workshops and like type energy type things like 5 years later? Did you think that you would work into that space, that it would become part of it?
I think I had an idea that it would in some way. And I guess that's part of it, is having that freedom that it doesn't have to have a specific answer. But I think I'd already done my Reiki level 1 and level 2. So I had some concept that this was going to be part of like a long-term vision to kind of grow and expand in different places. Yeah, it's really interesting. It's kind of really been able to help me in my healing process. The other thing I wanted to talk about is like healing through the content. So my book is called Engineering Bliss: Becoming an Engineer and a Spiritual Being. And I was like, I'm an engineer, I'm an energy healer and a spiritual practitioner. And then like trying to find this middle ground of duality, of allowing myself to be both. And, that's really where I think my work is leading, is the corporate spaces, business spaces. How do we create space for creativity? How do we use mindfulness in our workplace? So I think that's really where I'm going down, is using energy healing and meditation in professional contexts and offering these services to professional women, whether they're logical minded. So I guess, yeah, it's really helped me identify myself and that level of credibility, sophistication, elegance, and allowing spirituality to be what it needs to be for me. And it doesn't need to be the same for every person. Yeah.
It's so beautiful because you've become a bridge. right? Like you have this logical space and then this kind of like energetic space. And then because you were able to bridge it, you get to go back and be that bridge for other people. And your book
Mhm.
has become that evolution of that. It has become this space to be that bridge. And I think that's so beautiful. I mean, we obviously wouldn't want to put that on someone as like a new writer, like, oh, this is going to be your future. That might be really overwhelming, but it could also be kind of exhilarating to feel like it's okay
Mhm.
not to know the end yet. It's okay, and it
Yeah.
could be even better
Yeah.
than you imagine. It could be way more impactful than you imagine. And the starting place of that, just to bring it all the way back, is just to get a piece of paper and a pencil and just start writing down your thoughts and your feelings. And when those things come up, that energetic block that comes up, like, oh, I don't want to do this. Oh, I'm scared. Oh, I'm afraid of the shame or the vulnerability to, to face that. Yeah.
I agree so much. Yeah, 100%. This is where we show our expertise and show our story and put ourselves out into the world. And like we keep saying, allowing space and time and discipline to do that. That's where the magic is, because at the end of the day, you're the expert in your story. You're the expert in your lived experience of your journey, of your life, of your challenges that you've overcome. And once you've gone through that process and got out the other side, it gives you self confidence because you've sat with the feelings, you've sat with the emotions, you've sat with the experiences. And then if someone invites you to give a talk or invites you to come and do a workshop, there's this level of groundedness and self confidence that you're like, oh shit, I know what I'm talking about and I've got this. And you've gone through the stories and you've gone through the information in your own head so that you can have those conversations and you can share anecdotes because you've rewritten the same story 5 times and you edited it. And so that anecdote is like, it's in you. Like you've got that story cemented.
It's so true. It does give you confidence. It's a bonus. It's a little extra
Mhm.
bonus that you get from this process.
There's so many bonuses from the writing process.
Well, I'm going to just ask our one final question, and that is if you could just give like your final thoughts or final say. This the people who are watching this video are just sitting there with these ideas and they can't quite make that jump. And is there anything that you could say to just lastly encourage them to just get started?
So my last piece of advice to people, if they're wanting to get started, is make the commitment to yourself, buy a journal, start setting some time for YouTube, for learning, connecting in other writing groups. It's like having the intention to expand your community, that can be really important. And just start writing and allow yourself to move through the processes. So whether it's journaling or writing up a structure, like understanding for me all the steps and processes, like it sounds like this is a lot, but just allowing time to dive into the process things, wasn't it? But it like
No, it's so valuable. And I think that there's all these little nuggets that you've given us today. And I think that it's just a matter of getting going, right? And if you can understand the process, you know what you're getting going with. If you can do a little bit of education, you know the steps that you're going to take. And like you've said throughout this whole time, not giving ourselves that pressure of a timeline, but holding the intention of the commitment. No matter what, there's this commitment. It might take a year, it might take 10 years. My first book took me 5 years to write. This book that I'm working on right now, I'm at like year 6 and it's not even halfway. But when it does come together, it does come together.
and I think understanding the balance in your life, for me, I was like, I'm going to quit my job and write a book. And there are some practicalities in life and understanding how to fit this in with your life. And I've heard it from so many people that the busier they are, the more productive they are. And I think that can be really true. The number one piece of advice that I was given was decide to make time for writing. Decide that you're going to do 10 minutes a day. And that's consistently, people have said, start with 10 minutes a day. Start with the act of sitting down at the desk. Start with the act of writing 5 lines, 5 sentences, 500 words. And there was another quote that was like, start with the bare minimum. So if it's 200 words and doing 200 words every single day to start to build that muscle and that routine. And, everyone has a different story and a different life and different points, but maybe it's journaling in the car. Maybe it's sitting down at your desk 10 minutes before you start work. I've had times in my life where I've been super productive at my work computer before my work day starts. Might be before you go to bed, finding that 10 minutes a day, because if you really want to do something, you can find 10 minutes a day. And that's the starting point.
That's so beautiful. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being with us. And thank you for just sharing in this space and this vision to help women become authors. It's an absolute passion of mine. And I'm really, really grateful to have taken this time with you today. So thank you so much for being here. I will have all of the links to Jaimee's book, to her social media accounts, everything in the description box. You can also check our website for a blog all about our friends. So please tune in with what is going on. And Jaimee's going to be offering even more services in the future. So please check her out and watch for all of the things that are coming. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining me on another episode. I am so glad that you are here to hopefully enjoy this interview with me and Jaimee. And I hope that you will tune in next week for another interview. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next week. Bye.